first thing I notice is that there's no way to put a glass of water. I'd like to start by saying what an honor it is to be running for the leadership of the Green Party of BC. First, let me look at my watch and see how long I've got. For somebody like me who really believes in protection of the environment is where it came from for me, and I've been working on issues in that area for a long time. And it's a real, I feel proud to be standing in front of this group of people which contains people who have worked for so long and so hard on so many issues. So I really want to start by thanking all of you for all that you've done on all the issues that we've all worked on for such a long time. My own record is almost perfect. I don't think I've ever worked on an issue that in which I felt like I'd won or we won. But I know others have had more success, and I really salute, because I've seen people devote so much of their lives to these so important issues. To me, the fundamental underlying problems in Canada and in BC are that we don't have democracy and we don't have a free press. And a couple of minutes ago, I was standing outside and then somebody said, mention the healthcare issue. So I'm going to start off with that. I'd completely forgotten it in this speech, so I'm glad that he said that I should say something about it. I believe, as well as a lot of other people I know believe, that our healthcare system isn't being privatized because it doesn't work. It has been deliberately made not to work so that it can be privatized. And I've spoken to a lot of people, the people in the nursing union, people in groups that oppose the privatization of our healthcare, and they've said the same thing. And what we see is the power, the corporate power behind this, to be able to take this issue on of actually wrecking what used to be one of the world's great healthcare systems in many respects. And imagine the power they have to be able to do it. And I've looked into it. I'm writing a book and the issue of healthcare is somehow involved in the book. And I got a hold of some numbers. This is how they've done it. It's very simple. In 1993, Canada had 180,000 hospital beds. In 2003, we were down to 120,000 hospital beds. We went from 180,000 to 120,000 in 10 years, closing 1/3 of all the hospital beds in Canada. Now, I've spoken to people who work in healthcare, and of course they all say if you do that, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to have increasingly long waits for surgery, not because the doctors aren't there, but because there's no bed to put the person in, and so they can't operate. And the second thing that's going to happen is that you're going to have increasing chaos in your emergency rooms, because there's no bed in which to put the person who is now in the emergency room, so the next person can't get into the emergency room. And then the most important thing here is that nobody's ever seen these numbers. The media, which always tells us for years now that public health care doesn't work, public health care can't work, never tells us that we've closed 1/3 of all the beds in Canada, and that's why it's not working. They also don't say that, I think it's in 1975, hospitals took about 45% of the entire healthcare budget. Now it's down to about 30%. That loss of 15% costs our hospitals probably $17 billion a year. Much more than enough to reopen all the beds. And what's the biggest cost increase? It's been in the cost of drugs and pharmaceuticals. So in other words, we Canadians are taking our money from our hospitals and giving it to the drug companies. And that's the real cause. Aside from the fact that, a lot of the medicines don't work anyways, and we keep out Chinese medicine, and we keep out so many other systems that can do a good job. But you know, in terms of the two problems that they made into the issue for privatizing healthcare, the surgical wait list and the emergency room problems, it's caused by the cutting of beds, which they've done deliberately, the politicians, and the media has kept secret. I've believed for a long time that protection of the planet and the environment is the #1 job that we have to do. And I think what all of us have to do is use less and have less. I think if we're not willing to do that, then it's not going to work. And I think most people are. But unfortunately, it doesn't matter what most people are or what most people want or what most people think, because the people of this country are no longer even in the game. We're not on the board. We don't have democracy. I'd like to talk for just a minute or two about democracy. The word democracy comes from the Greek, which I didn't know a few years ago. In fact, I realized as I started to write this little book on democracy a few years ago that I knew nothing about democracy. And I thought, isn't that funny that someone who's lived in a democracy all their lives knows nothing about democracy? And as I read on and worked on, I began to realize that no, it's not funny at all, it's deliberate. The word democracy comes from the Greek, demos, the people, and kratia, to rule. It means the people rule. And what I'd like to see more than anything else is for the government of British Columbia to start to work for the people of British Columbia, and the government of Canada to start to work for the people of Canada. And I think it's only when we have that, when the public again has a voice in what's going on, that we can begin to solve our problems. Because another thing that I've come to realize, and I think this is correct, although I'm not sure, is that our problems are their solutions. And by their, I mean the elite, the corporate elite that I think runs this country. Why do we have homelessness? It's not because we don't have the money. For $1 billion, we could build 6,000 units of low-cost housing at a cost of $160,000 each. The federal government just ran a surplus of $14 billion. The provincial government just ran a surplus of $4 billion. The money's there, we know what to do. You know, we don't have to build the projects that they like to tell us about. All we need is rental housing everywhere, because the market dictates that if there's more around, the prices will come down. I'm already out of time. We can build democracy. We can build democracy like you build a house. You just have to take certain steps, and each one of those steps will be a step in the right direction. I think we need proportional representation. We've already voted for it, 57% to 43%, but our ruler, Mr. Campbell, says that 57% isn't good enough. He got 46% to vote. I think I'd like to see the next leader, whoever that is, and the Green Party itself, go hard after these people. Say to Mr. Campbell, you're a dictator. You have no right to set a 60% limit. 50% plus 1 wins. It was enough to win in Quebec. It was enough to win in Meech Lake. 50% plus 1 wins. We also need parliamentary reform. Parliamentary reform means changing the way our parliaments and our governments work so that they begin to work for us. And the main step there is removing power from the party leaders, especially if that person becomes premier or prime minister. Because in Canada, more than in any other Western democracy, power gets concentrated into one set of hands. And that is the antithesis of democracy. And there's many other steps we can take within parliamentary reform to make our governments work for us. And we just have to do these things. Of course, the media never really reports on these kinds of issues because the media represents corporate Canada. It's owned by corporate Canada. It works for corporate Canada. It doesn't work for us. And why would they want democracy when they control everything now, or virtually everything? Moving right along. Just tap me on the shoulder when I'm done. The last thing I'd like to say, just some of the things I believe in. I believe we can get rid of homelessness, and we can do it. It's a disgrace that we have it. I'm totally opposed to nuclear power. I support I support removing the forest companies from the land base of British Columbia. I support doing what people want. I think the job of the government should be to inform as best they can from all points of view, to inform the citizenry, to find out what the citizenry wants, and then to do that. And I think if we begin to have more democracy in British Columbia and Canada, we of the Green Party and we as individuals will get what we want, because I think we want what most people want, a clean, safe, decent future with good jobs for everybody, and etc. Thank you very much.
Jack Etkin, everyone. Thank you very much.